We bring in Tom Murphy here on the Morning Rush. Tom, I wonder, have you already thought what you're going to ask Sam Pittman today? I think health, COVID numbers is always a concern. What are you wanting to talk to Sam Pittman today about at 12 o'clock?
Yeah, just what the second unexpected open week was about. It looks to me like, well, he said Thursday that they really didn't do any heavy hitting or do any hitting at all, did walkthroughs and stuff like that. So they have to kind of regroup and refocus, redirect. I tell you, y'all watching this Missouri team, they're pretty salty. So, maybe get a little bit more in depth about what he saw from them after the shutout over the weekend.
Tom, you probably remember the Missouri defensive lineman and linebacker Eric Brazel make the comments kind of derogatory towards Arkansas, speaking down on the state, and I know that ticked a lot of people off, and yet Missouri was still able to beat the Razorbacks. Last time you beat them was in 2015. How important is it for Sam Pittman to get off on the right note against Missouri and kind of rekindle this rivalry a little bit?
Well, in the full spectrum of where Sam Pittman wants to get this program going and how wants people to view it, winning another road game at Missouri, your Thanksgiving weekend traditionally rival, would be very big. And that 2016 team, Arkansas had. I thought in 2014 the renewal game up there in Columbia, the Razorbacks got out to a lead, and I can't remember all the details, but I felt like they should have won that game, and I think they were a pretty big underdog. They won it in 2015, cold, rainy day, 28-3. Drew Lock was still kind of a baby at quarterback at that time, and obviously got a lot better. But I thought the 2016 game, Barry Odom's first against Arkansas, that was Arkansas's game to win, and he gambled on a 4th and 7 deep in his own territory and ran this fake punt look. And it came one play after Ryan Pulley almost intercepted a pass deep in Missouri territory, almost picked it off. Then they run the fake punt, and the momentum switched, and Missouri won that game. Well, they haven't lost to the Razorbacks since then, and just a total giveaway game. So it's very important for Arkansas. I mean, this is going to be your season-ending trophy game to start winning some of them, including on the road.
Yeah. You mentioned Barry Odom. That's one of the understories here is his return to Columbia, Missouri, as being their former head coach. And what kind of motivation does that provide for these players? I mean, they weren't his players at Missouri, but they're his players now. I mean, I would think they would want to have his back in this situation. How much do you think he would want to play up that angle this week for the defensive side of the ball?
I think the players probably would do that for him. And Sam Carter obviously had been at Missouri as well, and Brad Davis. So you got guys on both sides of the ball who have a pretty good knowledge of Missouri personnel. And not only that, but they've had a couple of weeks to break them down and look at their strengths and weaknesses and how to attack them. Man, I see this game as a total toss-up. I know that Missouri opened as a 1.5 favorite, which is almost like, Arkansas's favored on a neutral field in this game. But having watched them on Saturday, they're playing with a lot more confidence. Bazelak in the run-pass option game looks very, very, very tricky because Roundtree's a tough guy to get down on the ground. Beatty's a guy you could use in all different kind of ways. They've got a good set of receivers, including Bannister, who had that one big series in Little Rock last year that turned the tide of that game. So, and their defense is really striking right now. And Nick Bolton is one of the best linebackers in the country. So this is going to be a difficult game. Arkansas needs to win it in the trenches. And, if they had their defensive line all together against LSU, I have pretty good confidence they would have won that game. And they'd be sitting here at 4-4 with a chance to go to 500 and guarantee a 500 record for the season.
We're told this is a rivalry. It doesn't feel like a rivalry. What has to happen for this actually to become a rivalry between Arkansas and Missouri?
Yeah, Tommy, I don't know. I mean, does it take a couple of decades to feel like a rivalry? Does it Does it take an in-game fight or something like that? I don't know. Maybe just some classic games, some classic finishes, things that people will remember. Like when we talk about the LSU series, you got the Kobe Hamilton play before halftime. You got Darren McFadden with a wooden bat. You got huge wins for the Razorbacks that kind of get seared into your memory. And right now, that 28-3 game here in Fayetteville, all I remember was it was dismal. It was rainy, and other details of that game just escaped me. So just need to have some fantastic finishes and things like that. I did later that day go down to West Fork and watch Smackover with a young Jordan Jones play against West Fork in the playoffs in the rain.
How about that, man? You're just busy bee that day. Talking with Tom Murphy here on the Morning Rush. Tom, when you think about the jobs that have opened up so far in the SEC, South Carolina and Vanderbilt, I found it interesting that Jordan Rodgers thought that Barry Odom would be a name that Vanderbilt should consider. Is that something that Arkansas should keep an eye on, those two SEC jobs popping open with a former head coach in this conference who's your DC?
Well, yeah. I mean, and here's the thing: his work this season hasn't gone unnoticed by the people who make decisions. So he'll probably be in line for a good raise, and it just depends on what he told Sam Pittman. Like, hey, I'd like to stick with you for 3-4 years. I don't know what conversations they've had together. 1 year, I'm sure he would aspire to go back to being a head coach, but Vandy's a very, very tough job. Jordan Rodgers did refer to him as a program builder type of coach. I get it. I think Barry Odom has the right mentality and personality to be a program builder. But after one season at Arkansas, do you want to take that on? And overnight yesterday, during the course of the day, I did read several other, kind of plugged in and national guys who have a good feel. And I don't think Odom ranks as highly, just in terms of guys who would be a good natural fit at Vanderbilt, as a handful of other guys. So at this stage, I don't know if he would be way high on Vanderbilt's radar, but I would like to see Barry Odom get another shot as a head coach somewhere, but maybe not as difficult a rebuild as Vanderbilt.
Tom, you brought up the 2014 game, and if you remember, Brandon Allen was injured I think the second half of that game, and that's kind of why Arkansas wasn't able to pull it out. But we were discussing earlier the comparison between Felipe Franks and Brandon Allen as we're sitting watching BA start for the Bengals yesterday. And I feel like that both Felipe this season and Brandon in 2015 weren't fully appreciated for what they did for the Razorbacks. Do you think that Felipe Franks has gotten enough credit for what he's done for this football team in 2020?
I guess it depends on where you look for your validation in the press, on TV, and I think Felipe's gotten a lot of good publicity. I mean, every time I do radio spots with the other team in Florida and Auburn and all these other radio deals I do, I talk about what a huge addition he's been. I mean, just his maturity level and his huge arm. I mean, think about the big touchdowns he's connected on with Burks and Woods and Devion Warren. The fact he keeps them in games, how important his legs are. Brandon Allen, I think, was a very underrated scrambler. I thought, that probably could have been exploited a little bit more. And certainly a guy who knew the ins and outs of the offense, very clever guy. And Felipe, even though you think of him as a guy who can hurt you with his legs, he slipped in the LSU game, and he's kind of it seems like it's hard for him to stay on balance when he makes a cut. And I don't know if it's due to wet grass or anything, but if I'm evaluating Felipe, I say he's done an A job. He's done great work in terms of knowing the offense, getting guys in the right spot, delivering the ball on time, the deep ball touch. But he's held on to it. He's held on to the ball a little bit more than you'd want. I mean, if you're really going to critique him, and probably had a few more sacks when maybe he should bolt straight out of the pocket when option A, B, C is not open, go, instead of kind of looking at the rush. So, to me, that's a very a minor point, but it's a valid point.
Let me shift to basketball for a second, and maybe we'll come back and cap off the conversation with another football question or two. But we didn't get to visit on Thursday because of the holiday, but Arkansas is off to a 2-0 start in basketball. Scored 142 in the first game, 69 in their second game. Mm-hmm. I know you're not covering it directly in this COVID era. Bob's at the games, but I know you've been watching intently what has happened with this basketball team these first two games. Just your thoughts after Arkansas kind of blew the doors off of Mississippi Valley State, and then had a whole different game plan to beat North Texas on Saturday.
Yeah, I get the sense that Eric Musselman is highly engaged, like highly interested in how to deploy his talent. He didn't use the bench. He didn't go near as deep in the North Texas game. Well, it wasn't really a blowout, and it was such a different pace game, as you mentioned. I mean, Grant McCaslin has got it going on in terms of they won the conference last year. They know what they're doing. They want you to play at their tempo. And Arkansas just happened to be, better. They didn't shoot great in that game. And, of course, Valley comes down and shoots it before, 15 seconds is down off the shot clock. And Arkansas just had a great shooting night. I tell you, I think Connor Vanover's rebounding, shot blocking is probably a little bit stronger than I expected it would be. And obviously he's going to be a key cog now. But I do think they need to get a little bit more defensive rebounding from people other than Vanover. And the good thing is they got many games to go before conference, and they can kind of sort things out. But how much are the freshmen, the true freshmen, going to really impact this roster remains to be seen. But, like the direction so far, they got some good veterans like Smith and Tate and Note who look like they could be good end-of-game guys.
Tom, before we let you go, man, do you want to talk about your Falcons, the big win yesterday?
I put out a tweet that, if we crush the one team that beat the Chiefs this year, then logically that makes us the best team in football. Of course, that was a joke. We've choked away too many games this year, but, at 4-7, if you reverse the games we blew against the Bears and the Cowboys and the Lions, suddenly, we could be a 7-4 team. But I know that's not going to happen, and I don't know what's going to happen with Matt Ryan. He looked great yesterday. Who knows what direction we're headed?
That's a good question. All right, Tom, we appreciate it as always, buddy. We'll get into more of a preview of Missouri on Thursday.
Sounds great. Thanks, y'all.